Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. You're welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mark Gibson, and today we're also joined by Pat Murphy, who's going to be helping us out with questions later on. Welcome, Pat. The Signpost Series is brought to you by Teagasc Connected in association with Dairy Sustainability Ireland, the National Rural Network and Food Drink Ireland SkillNet. In Ireland, all water policy and management is led by the Water Framework Directive, and under this, the country has been set a target of achieving good status for all its waters. However, despite a lot of good work over the last 20 to 30 years, we're still falling short in achieving this target. The ASSAP programme, which is known as the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme, is working with farmers in a free and confidential advisory service to help improve water quality. And to give us an update on the ASSAP programme this morning, we're delighted to be joined by Noel Meehan, who is manager of the ASSAP programme, and also Joe Crockett, coordinator of the Dairy Sustainability Ireland. Gentlemen, you're welcome to this morning's webinar.
Thanks, Mark.
Noel, I think you're going to lead us off with this morning's presentation, and you're going to give us an update on progress within the ASSAP programme. And then, Joe, you're going to give us an update on the more policy side and the future of bonus schemes from the cooperative perspective. And Pat, you're going to join us then for questions afterwards. So, Noel, we'll hand straight over to you, and we will talk to you in a little bit.
Okay, lovely. So, look, thanks to the Signpost series for giving us the opportunity to talk here this morning, myself and Joe. And I suppose I just want to start obviously by just acknowledging all the players and all the partners and all the people who are heavily involved in the ASSAP program. So, you know, obviously the dairy co-ops as outlined there, and obviously we have a partner in LawPro who are providing us with the science for in each PAA. And then the funders from the local, from the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and the Department of Agriculture. And Dairy Sustainability Ireland are on behalf of the co-ops there. So just to give a quick outline of the presentation, just going to go through a little bit of progress to date. Previous webinars I would have given a lot of data, but this one is going to be a lot more toned back on data, just to give a quick upshot where we are with progress. But I want to really focus on advisor-farmer interaction and implementation of measures. So we have a couple of case studies that I'm going to go through with you, and there's the upper deal, there's an EIP in there that ASSAP and LawPro are heavily involved in, and the co-ops are heavily involved in. And then there's another example there in the DICER 10, which I would have spoken about before, but I think it's worth revisiting again. Just a little bit of innovation that you know ASSAP and LawPro have pulled together, and a focus on diffuse nitrate loss in particular, and I'll just bring that to the meeting. And also we conducted an external review on ASSAP just really to see where we are and where we're going. So I think it's worth mentioning that as well. And then a look ahead to the third cycle that we're currently in. So we'll progress along there. So ASSAP to date, just at the end of July, just over 3,143 farmers have been assessed with 755 follow-up visits. So we're continuing to do the farmer meetings. We're active in nearly 124 PAAs. And what's really encouraging is this figure here of 96% engagement. That hasn't really changed much at all since the start of the program, which is a testament to the farmers, and also a testament to, you know, the engagement process that's there, and also to the support that we're getting from the farming bodies. So, you know, the very farming organizations there out there among the membership, and they're promoting ASSAP to the membership. So that's very much appreciated. We're getting good agreement on proposed measures. 93%. So I suppose the agreement is one thing, the implementation is another, and that's where we have to get more implementation of measures going on, and I'll explain that in a little while. On average, we're finding about 5 issues per farm. So it's not like there's massive issues out there, but there is, you know, massive numbers, but there is issues out there. And, you know, what we're trying to find out is, as I mentioned, the implementation of measures. So what we're finding is that of the high-risk measures that we have asked farmers the high-risk issues that we've asked the farmers to do measures on, there's implementation going on of about 62%. So that's where farmers have either started it or completed it, or it's an ongoing basis where it might be a practice change. So obviously on the converse, we have 38% where we haven't seen any progress, or maybe farmers might have changed their mind on a particular mitigation action. So, and that's for a number of reasons. I suppose, it takes time to come back and reassess these farms and see if they've actually started to implement these measures. They may be waiting for the new acre scheme to come along to avail of some funding there to compensate them for the measures they're going to put in, because ASSAP, as it stands currently, we don't have any money to give to farmers, so it's pretty much voluntary what they're doing and out of their own pocket. So that's important to note. So look, that's a figure that we want to get down lower, and we're working very hard to do that. And just to note as well that the number of advisors, Teagasc still have 20, but it's important to note that the co-ops have increased their numbers to 16 currently, and the plan is to increase it to 18 by the end of this year. So the co-ops, that's from an original number of 10. So look, that's very important to note that the co-ops have really acknowledged the role that they have to play in improving water quality. So look at a lot of data on this. I won't dwell on it too long. What we're looking at here is, the pressures have remained the same. It's pretty much 3/4 from the diffuse P nitrogen sedimentation, with point sources at 14%, and other issues around toxicity and ammonium there as well. So those pressures have remained pretty much uniform all through the year, all through the program so far. And just to break down on the enterprise that we've assessed, so with a strong emphasis on dairying from the co-ops, we have 32% of farms or dairy have been assessed by the dairy co-ops. 37% is our beef production, sheep at 7%, tillage at 4%, and other, and mixed farming. So that could be a combination of cattle and sheep, or beef and tillage, or dairy and tillage. And just finally then on the stats, the high risk, pretty most frequent high risk issues that we're finding, and again, these haven't really changed, so nothing different there. It's the diffuse losses. It's the diffuse loss of phosphorus from overland flow, drinking point stream fencing, bringing sedimentation and eutrophication, the application of buffers or the non-application of buffers, and then around nutrient management. So those are the top 5, and to be honest, those haven't really changed at all since the start of the program either. So it's quite consistent what the problems are, and we know where they are. We know what needs to be done to rectify them. So as I said, I wanted to talk about implementation and getting farmers to do things. And I suppose one of the things that has been done is LawPro and ASSAP, and supported by Ballyhura Development Company. They lodged an application for 80,000 funding to the department for a mini EIP. I think this is a great idea, and credit to the lads in LawPro, and obviously from Teagasc side of Emer Connery and Borry Fitzgerald, and in the co-op side Terry O'Mahony. They put their weight behind this, and they saw it as a great opportunity to try and get some funding for farmers to implement key measures that would help improve water quality in that upper Deal area. They selected two catchments out of the Deal. So the Deal PAA is a 6 or 8 water body PAA, but they just picked 2. So this is the Deal 20, and this is the Deal 50, as far as I know. And so the Cork-Limerick border. And it's a very heavy soils catchment with phosphorus and sediment issues throughout. And what the project was to do was targeting biodiversity measures in particular areas, basically targeting them to where you have overland flow pathways and delivery points into the drainage network, and trying to match suitable buffers or riparian margins or various mechanisms to minimize sediment and phosphorus loss in these areas. So the partners, important to note, is Ballyhura Development, ASSAP, LawPro, Donald Daly, I'm sure is familiar to a lot of the people on this call, OPW, and then on Fisheries Ireland. So they've been actually working there, and engagement with about 90% of landowners, so that's very positive bit of work. But it is, and I've talked to the advisors about this, that they did say to note that it takes a lot of engagement, a lot of time. They've gone to farmers 2, 3, 4 times, from initially making the call to identifying the problems to getting the farmer on board to sorting out an application for funding, to getting them implemented. So it takes time. So it's on the go about a year now, and it's only really at this stage that it's getting going, and it's finishing up fairly soon. But they could really do another 6 to 12 months more to really see it out. But look, that's the time frame they have. So look, really it's a year to 2 years to get traction and get movement in a water body or in a project like this. So this is just an example of one of the bit of works that's gone in there. As you can see, this is just one of the EPA maps, the overland flow pathway maps, and you can see the hatched areas is where the water starts to flow across the landscape. This is the actual river here, but there is a fairly major draining all this area, going off down here and joining the river up here. So the measure that was decided was to try and put in a wetland pond, as you can see here on the right hand side. This is newly constructed. It was literally gone in, I think, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And the idea is that this would catch the overland flow of water, and act as a kind of a settlement pond or a filtration pond, that the nutrients and sediment settle out before joining the drainage network and the outfall to the main drain. It's also planned to, obviously, the opportunity here then is to add in a bit of biodiversity and nature. So they're going to obviously plant it up with native trees, but also they're going to go farther than the pond. They're going to plant the flow pathway back up the way a little bit as well, to provide that extra bit of buffering and extra bit of protection. What they're also going to do is they're going to the farmer is going to do some drainage works on it as well, on that farm, because it's heavy ground. So in consultation with the advisor, they've decided to divert the drainage channels directly into this pond as well first. So again, to act as a settlement pond. And obviously, if they have going to put the 12 inches of topsoil over the drainage, just to give that added layer of protection. They are not going to bring it to the surface. It's bad practice. They're going to put that 12 inches of soil to give protection to the water or to the drain.
Noel, could I just ask in relation to the ponds there, is there a plan to have a continuous management of that at a later stage? Is there a risk that could become a sink of phosphate, given that you have, waters, slowing water down there? Is that something?
Yeah, so I suppose they'll have to see. Initially, I don't think there's any real plan on that. To be fair, Mark, I think what this will do is it will, there shouldn't, after a period of time, there shouldn't be much sediment in that. It's going to be a managed field. There's going to be a good buffering. All that brown area there is going to be planted, so you're going to have a lot of buffering there to trap sediment and phosphorus coming across. Anything that's left over will go to the wetland pond, plus the drainage work that they're going to do. Again, you're going to have that 12 inches of topsoil over the drain, so you shouldn't be getting too much phosphorus down through that. Mm-hmm. There shouldn't be too much sediment coming down through that either. So it's more just to trap any excess water. It's kind of a water retention feature as well. From a flood prevention point of view. So I would say they'll have to watch it, but I don't expect that it's going to be overloaded with sediment or phosphorus because of the other works that they're trying to do here to capture that as well before it gets into that pond.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. And just another example here, where farmers have been asked to fence off areas and plant native trees. So you have an area up here. Again, it's the fall is to this point, and there's a drain along here that goes off. And this is the pictures of it. So you can quite, I hope you can see there in the photograph, there's quite a good fall all the way down to that point. So that's all the way down here to that point there. And it does get quite wet that spring, to show, the water really gets clogged up there. So that's what you would call a critical source area. And the plan there is to fence off 0.3 of a hectare, 3/4 of an acre, plant with native trees, and to manage the critical source area in that way. it's low productivity land anyway, and the farmer's happy to do that, and he's going to get a compensation for that. And the same up here on this point here is another area that's going to be fenced off. So this is the one farm, so it kind of stretches from this point to this point here. That's the one farmer. So look, that's really positive work that's been done out there, and it can show what can be done where you have good farmer engagement. And I think that these are things that without financial compensation, farmers would be less willing to do. They might do something for you, but they wouldn't necessarily maybe put in a pond or maybe fence off. They might fence off a much smaller area than 3/4 of an acre, for the purposes of water protection. So I think it's just important to note that as well. One final example here. This is again from the Upper Deal. It's a stretch of river down along here. And this farmer here owns this bit of ground, so he's going to fence off all this river, and he's going to install 3 water troughs to provide water supply, and they obviously are going to be 20 meters away because of the regulations. But unfortunately, that's the way the river is at the minute. So as you can see, it certainly needs a lot of work, and needs to be fenced off, and cattle access needs to be prevented. So again, this is money that is going to be well spent by the EIP into prevention. Obviously there's quite a lot of sedimentation, cattle access, bank erosion, all that kind of stuff. So there's a plan in place there to try and fence it off and try and protect that river, and provide an alternative drinking supply, because that's very important from the farmer's point of view. So the second case study then is just Lough Ennell, Dysart 10 and Lough Ennell, and I would have spoken about this before, but I think it's worth revisiting again. The problem there was Lough Ennell is a bathing water, and it was being impacted by pathogen losses from agriculture. So this is your E. coli, and also there was diffuse phosphorus and sediment losses also impacting. And this is the water body here in purple, and it flows into Lough Ennell. And I don't know if listeners might be familiar with it, but Lilliput bathing waters is just here at the top of at the bottom of Lough Ennell. So it was very popular bathing water, but it was in danger of losing its bathing water status because of impacts from pathogens in particular. And you can just maybe see in the graph, this is for 2018-2019, that at the bottom there you have the blue line. That's the sufficient water quality. So anything above the line is poor. So anything up here is poor, and you can see, particularly during the bathing water season, which is June, July, August, you're getting spikes of pathogens, E. coli, and that's probably to do with summer spreading of slurry, heavy rainfall events, and they're getting washed off into the drainage network. And you can see quite high spikes on that. So something needed to be done quite quickly. And the ASSAP advisor, so that's David Webster and Niall McLaughlin, I think was up there in that area from Lakeland. They visited 23 farms based on OPRA referrals, breakdown of 19 beef and 4 dairy farmers. And issues identified were diffuse pea and sediment losses, surface runoff from the land leading to sedimentary pea losses, and also that was going to bring your pathogens with it as well. Cattle access and drainage maintenance were the issues that they identified. So the mitigation advice, we kind of broke it down to 2. There's regulatory advice that's there, and maybe sometimes you just need to remind farmers of the obligations from a regulatory point of view. And that was around adherence to buffer zones and compliance with fertilizer limits and compliance with the organic manure storage and close periods as well. But then the voluntary actions were around riparian margins and management of critical source areas. Prevention of cattle access to waters. If you're, dairy farmers may have to prevent them, but other farmers don't. Might not be in environmental schemes either. And then an information or education part as well to farmers on drain maintenance, and there's a right way and a wrong way, and a right time and a wrong time to do this. And it was important to educate farmers on that. So some work's that gone in, a soil water tank, solar powered drinkers have gone in, fencing off of water courses, better buffer margins and low emission slurry spreading, again, better buffer margins for slurry spreading, and obviously then allowing the buffer margin to vegetate up as well. So they were the kind of measures that were needed to go in there. And this is the same graph as before, but now we've included 2020 and 21 data. So again, the green and the yellow is 2018, 2019. 2020 is the RNG ready one. So you can see that, there was a little bit of a spike, but it plateaued off for the rest of the year. And then 2021 is the purple line here down the bottom. So this is well below the blue line that indicates sufficient water quality. So I think it's worth just pointing that out, that, from talking to farmers and getting farmers to engage, and some structural work has gone in, obviously fencing and solar power drinking meters and that kind of thing, but most of it was voluntary by the farmer. So you can see how when we do get engagement, we can see that there are positive results. So very quickly, because I'm running out of time already. So with the increase in the dairy co-op advisors team to 18 advisors, and obviously then we're well aware that there is a nitrate problem where elevated levels of nitrogen are in the south and southeast area. We felt that there was an opportunity there to do something about providing greater advice and greater access to farmers around nitrogen. And we needed to provide referrals to these advisors to keep them working. Law Pro staff has remained at the same level. So we needed to come up with a new idea as to how we were going to do this. And the idea came around creating a referral for nitrogen. And this was primarily developed by Law Pro. And this will allow ASSAP advisors to visit farms in PAAs and in selected water bodies with elevated nitrate areas. So you have the typical or the traditional PAAs, but also other areas where you have high nitrate levels, and then provide mitigation advice on nitrate losses. And this is also relevant as well for tillage farmers and dry stock farmers. So the Teagasc advisors will be looking after that. So the catchment referrals for nitrogen has been developed for 1,231 water bodies across the south and east. I'll show you where those are in a minute. They are on a priority basis. So we will continue to work where the priority will be the traditional Law Pro referral, but we can also, once those are looked after, we can move on to these catchment referrals for nitrogen. And we have them broken down into 3 different categories. So water bodies contributing high nitrogen within catchments of concern, so there's 400 of those. High PIP-in areas in the catchments of concern, but not included above, is over 700. And then water bodies with elevated nitrogen outside the catchments of concern, and I'll show you where those are now in a second. So the first priority are the dark green ones. These are the ones where there's elevated levels of nitrogen that we are going into first priority, where we need to try and reduce the nitrate levels. But these are all part of bigger water bodies. So the green areas would be where the water levels, concentration of nitrogen aren't as high, but when you add them together bit by bit by bit, they do lead to an elevated downstream. So we need to obviously work on those as well. So they're the second priority. Then outside the catchments of concern that the EPA would have highlighted, there are a number of water bodies where there is elevated levels of nitrogen. So across the Midlands there, Offaly, North Tipperary, over in Dublin and Wexford primarily. So I think they're a really good idea. They're putting a focus on nitrogen. They're putting a bit of direction for advisors and where to go. We have spoken about, we trained advisors and talked to the advisors about where the focus should be and what the mitigations actions are. So I think it's a very positive development, and the co-ops are obviously very much engaged in this as well. Very quickly again, we had an expert review of ASSAP carried out last year, basically to do a comprehensive assessment of ASSAP, make recommendations for the future development of the programme, and see where we go. We had quite a strong panel of members. I'll let you read through the names there yourselves, but they all had an area of expertise, and they all contributed fantastically to it. This was carried out this time last year. There was 10 high-level findings and recommendations. Unfortunately, I won't have time to go through them all here today, but it's primarily around the focus of ASSAP to maintain, to stay as on water quality. We spoke about funding, funding mechanism, tying in with the mainstream advisory service and making sure that we do continuous kind of readjusting and reevaluation of what we're doing in the PAAs. And also, recording and reporting mechanisms need to be improved. So, that's pretty much it. These will be available on website, and you can have a look through them yourselves at a later date. Okay, I'll jump to that. So, just to kind of final slide from me. Implementation of mitigation actions is key to realizing water quality improvements. We know that. We can see in the deal where we have finance, we can see, farmers are prepared to do stuff and get things done and maybe go over and beyond kind of the more better mitigation actions that are out there. So that's important. So on the back of that, we made a case to both the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Housing around getting some additional funding for farmers to compensate them for putting in measures. And I think great credit is due to both departments for announcing funding of 60 million over 5 years for water quality EIP. So that's kind of in the gestation period at the minute. The fund will provide farmers with money to implement measures. So, this will be very important. It'll be available to, farmers and PAAs and other water quality initiatives, not necessarily just ASSAP, but other water quality initiatives as well that are out there. The catchment referrals for nitrogen, are very much a new and innovative approach to tackling the diffuse nitrogen problem. But do we need to maybe think about doing something similar for phosphorus? That's a question that we've been thinking about in ASSAP. Can we, and with LawPro, can we look at doing something like this so that we can expand the reach and up the pace? But look, that's all very much dependent on a number of factors, whether it's possible to do such a thing, and obviously then funding and numbers and things like that. We all know that there's been a very much a strengthening of the GAP regulations there in March, so they would help the situation. And then obviously as well, we need to expand the use of the EPA PIP maps, and they're very much fundamental to the water quality measures in acres. I think that's positive because it will certainly bring them more mainstream for more advisors, and they get more familiar with them. That can only be a positive because the maps are very useful and they give great direction, and hopefully that will help from a water quality point of view. And we're working very hard to get a farm sustainability planner developed as well. So development advisory tools, and that would be for water quality and biodiversity and greenhouse gases as well. And finally, we've done a lot of work with our partners and colleagues as well in LawPro and the departments and the EPA around the National Agricultural Inspections Programme. It's something that was very much highlighted by the EU decision with regards to the derogation around inspection programs and around enforcement of measures. So I suppose from an ASSAP point of view, we need to be able to work with farmers, but from a government point of view, they need to be able to carry out their inspection program. So we've engaged with them in that, and I think we have a plan in place where we can all work well together on that. So I'll just put that up there for a finish. This was before this man became king, but he was down in a farm in Waterford earlier on in the year, and spoke with some Signpost advisors and obviously with Cathal Summers there from ASSAP. So I leave the questions till after Joe, I think, Mark.
Okay, that's great, Noel. Thank you so much for that. Great example of an evidence-based approach to targeting measures. Really excellent program, and I think huge acknowledgement must go out to all of the farmers that have engaged in the program and all of the ASSAP advisors across the country who are developing those positive relationships. So look, we'll come back to some of the questions after Joe's presentation, but it's great to see that funding coming on stream through the EIP, a direct result of a recommendation from the ASSAP program. So that's much needed funding. I mean, we've all seen that over the years that has been a stumbling block for implementing some of the measures on farms. So Joe, you're going to maybe talk to us a little bit about the thinking that's going on at a cooperative level. So if you could just share your screen with us. It's great to see huge turnout today. We've nearly 300 participants this morning, so huge interest in this topic.
Okay, guys, can you see my screen?
Yeah, that looks great, Joe.
Great stuff. Okay, we'll get started. Okay, thanks very much, Nate. I suppose what I want to talk about firstly is the context in which ASSAP sits. And clearly, everybody is familiar with the new ask of the agri sector to deliver a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions to bring it down to the 16.5 million tonnes. And that's obviously a big area of focus for urban Ireland, and all of Ireland is very focused on energy reduction at the present time. So there's a lot happening in this space, and very significant changes for every sector of society, including agriculture. That's what we've got to deliver, and that's what we've got to now move on to implementation on once various kind of reports or various kind of reports are signed off. But we equally have a major challenge in relation to water quality. It is the case that agri pressures on waters have been increasing against a backdrop of urban wastewater pressures reducing because of huge investment by the state. And as Noel has mentioned, and on the back of the Law Pro and the EPA science maps that you have seen, NXS is a particular problem for dairy, and the semi-drought conditions that we've had have added to the intensity of that in the current year. I suppose we're also coming to a new recognition about PXS in the area that's kind of left of the line from Dundalk to Courtmac Sherry. That this is something as well that on the beef side that we also have, there has been movement on, and that we collectively all have to try to not try, but actually we have to fix both climate and we have to fix water in the same way as urban wastewater is fixed, and in the same way as other kind of any other pressures are also fixed. Ammonia happily is stabilizing, which is kind of good news. Biodiversity stuff is improving, but more to be done. And we know that the structures of the cap payment system are changing in the light of the Fit for 55 and in the light of the EU movement in relation to climate change targets. And it is the case across Europe, for example, that water is gone into short supply in an awful lot of places. And if we are blessed by our environment to have such good supplies of water in a temperate climate, which enables grass to be grown here in New Zealand in a way that is so carbon efficient, that it makes perfect sense for us to take greater care of the huge resource that water is, as well as kind of the huge resource that our land is and our forestry is and our climate is. So this is kind of what cap restructuring is now moving to support. Now, the Dairy Vision Group has been looking at what are the steps that have to be taken or that should be taken to get us to that climate change target of 25%. And there's some good stuff in there, but it's to be signed off, and then we can move on to implementation. Clearly, dairy has sort of been receiving sort of significant PR challenges over the course of the past while. Again, I think sort of in some respects, partially fairly, one could say, because it is a case of water quality is under pressure from both dairy and beef and from tillage. But it is also the case that our climate is designed for the growing of grass. And that means then that we can produce, that the humble cow can produce good quality cheese and whey and milk and specialized nutrition for old age and for athletes and for babies and so on and so forth, which is a unique thing that we can do better than anywhere else. And I think that is something, and it also is kind of holding up the economy of rural Ireland in a way that very few other things are doing. But at the same time, that does add another responsibility on us that we do have to, if we want license to continue to produce, we must fix climate, and we must fix water, and we must fix ammonia, and we must improve on biodiversity and get that really right. But the good news is that all of these things are eminently fixable. And that's what gives me great, That's what gives me great optimism. And I think we should be optimistic for the future, that in the light of the kind of the great improvements that were made by virtue of Food Harvest and Foodwise, where the entire agri sector was mobilized to help the economy and to help ourselves from such trouble. So our sector has a great track record of success. And I think we can now mobilize in the same way to address these particular sustainability challenges and overcome them. Hello. Now, yeah, so this is the next slide. So ASSAP is a unique industry government cooperation. It has been expanded this year by the co-ops in light of the ASSAP of the external review team recommendation. There is very good cooperation among all the agencies, which is a very hard thing to achieve, and trust has continued to build up amongst us all. And again, it is fair to acknowledge the funding of the Department of Housing and the Department of Agriculture, as well as of the co-ops themselves, and that's what keeps the program going. So it is a good model, and it's part of a developing toolkit to support farmers and suppliers to improve water, climate, biodiversity, ammonia, and to achieve chemical fertilizer reduction. Now, even in the news yesterday, there was great focus on the fact that Russia is not allowing sort of fertilizer production across the world. So I think that we need to re-examine our attitudes to slurry to say, look, this is an exceptionally rare resource and it should be husbanded and used better than it has perhaps been used up to now. Now, it is also the case that further structural change is on the way on all aspects of sustainability. And, you know, we have to be agile and we have to be proactive and we have to own these kind of issues and, you know, make the change and get on with it and get things done and fix it. And that protects the economies and the economic gains that we've already made, which have been significant, it has to be said. And again, part of the great success story for rural Ireland. So I just want to talk briefly about the sustainability payments, which is kind of another tool that's emerging. This is Carberry's one, and you know, these are the different elements that, you know, in terms of people getting a little bit of being paid to do sustainability stuff. So those are the different elements that Carberry have at the present time, and they've introduced that earlier this year. Dairygold have a system in as well. And that's the Dairygold kind of reasoning as to why they have a particular focus on the sustainability payment system. And that adds to these other kind of components that they also have around ESTAS and milk recording and herd health bonus and all of that. Kerry's Evolve program is also there, and this is what it focuses on. And you can see that that all these programs have different areas of focus, but they're all moving towards the same thing ultimately. And in terms of farmers and suppliers being paid to do good stuff. And I think that is kind of very beneficial to everybody. And even here with the Kerry Evolve program, and likewise you'll have seen it on the Carberry program, that in relation to encouraging and incentivizing a switch to use of protected urea to help water quality. Tier Lawn, which is formerly Glanbia, there again, this is very recent production by them, and you can see that their commitments just on the bottom line, and they're, you know, the 18 million that they are bringing forward for payments to suppliers, and that level of payment, that amount of money is kind of common to all of the co-ops that you'll have seen, that they're, you know, it's double-digit payments for farmers to do the stuff. So if you add up the commitment that this all means, plus the commitment that of the cost of ASSAP, these are kind of significant and meaningful developments by the co-ops and by the processors, with more to come. So that's just a gist of it. Thanks very much, Mark. I hope that was a bit helpful.
Well, thank you, Joe. That was an excellent overview of what's happening at a cooperative level. And I think you talked about having that ownership of the issues by farmers is so important, and I think really is happening out on the ground. Could I ask you, Joe, just that, I mean, the levels of payments that are being offered under those programs, do you think are they sending a strong enough signal back to the farm gate? I mean, I think you mentioned 1 cent per litre there as an incentive by one of the cooperatives.
I think we're on the start of a journey here. I mean, we're seeing the capped payments being, the cap system being restructured now to again for farmers to be paid to do sustainability stuff. And the government and all of the party leaders have been very strong to say the state will support farmers to do this kind of good stuff. And clearly the schemes that we've seen over the course of the past while are going to evolve further, and the other co-ops will be bringing on systems as well. So as we try to tackle the kind of the big ticket issues like climate and water and biodiversity, you could even go into kind of energy conservation and so on and so forth, and deforestation, that these will all be part of the new toolkit that will be there, linked alongside the the good work that Teagasc is doing on the Signpost Farms program, and the good work that farmers themselves are doing. So I think between us all, there is, as I said, I'm optimistic about the way that this can all move too. But it will require, I think, over the course of the coming 2 or 3 months, kind of a movement away from policy analysis and policy development into implementation. And that the quicker we get to implementation, the quicker we will address these issues, because there will be time lags from the time that you do the implementing stuff to the time that the science will reflect the actions that have been taken. So I think that the quicker we move now from reports and thinking and talking into action, that's the next kind of strategic set of steps that we need to take. On top of all the work that has been done up to now, because ESTAS, for example, has been a very, very good program. And there's been very good programs that have been done under all of the department schemes that have been very strong, and all the Teagasc schemes. So look, it's on to the next iteration is kind of really where we need to get to, and into the next stage of implementation.
I was speaking to some colleagues in Greece who actually visited one of the ASSAP farms there last week, kindly hosted by Deirdre Glynn and Carl Summers, and they were hugely impressed with the cooperation that's going on across all of the different, between public and private agencies. I know representatives from LawPro were there as well. So it's a good news story. Noel, a question coming through there in relation to the monitoring of water quality. So I know that the process is that the scientists go in and assess the streams and the water quality, and then your agricultural advisors will then go in to support farmers in implementing measures. What level of monitoring takes place after that, to see that those measures are actually having an effect?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, at the ultimate monitoring body for water quality, as I'm sure most people know, is the EPA. So, it's the EPA status that they report on every 3 years will give that's the one that matters really. Whatever other bit of monitoring that's been done will help paint a picture, but ultimately it's the EPA's report, or EPA analysis and sampling, and their report comes out next. I think there's one due actually in the next wee while. Mm-hmm. So that will indicate where we are with it. But I know from the indicators report for 2020 that the comment in relation to ASSAP was that well, in relation to PAAs, was that where there was engagement in PAAs, that there was a greater level of improvement in water quality than in non-PA areas. Now, that is down to a number of factors. Local authorities are also working on PAs, there's other people working on PAs, so there's a number of factors there. So I suppose maybe we'll get a little bit more clarity, or a bit more information on that from the EPA in the next report as to what they think it's down to. But look, I suppose, from my point of view, what we're seeing is good farmer engagement. We're seeing that they're willing to do things. We're seeing that they need help. We're seeing that it involves a very intense advisory interaction. Both Emer, Connery and Paudie Fitzgerald and Terry were saying to me that it was 3, 4, 5 visits out in the deal there to get things done, and it's they're 12 months in now, and it's only getting going now. So that's the kind of level of engagement and intensity that's required to realize farmer to get measures in, and then the knock-on benefits then for water quality should follow.
And it's the long-term buy-in, I guess. Yeah. That's as a result of that engagement as well. Because sometimes people would say, well, why don't you just regulate all of this? And but I mean, you have shorter term responses as a result. We know that. Pat, some really excellent questions coming.
Yeah, and invite more. Just I suppose one, or a theme around a number of questions around farmer engagement, and one specific one for Lough were the measures all voluntary, or were the farmers given any payment? And there's a number of other questions around the extent of farmer engagement with the process.
Yeah, so I suppose it was for the dye search and Lough the majority of it is voluntary, but I kind of broke it down into kind of the regulatory ones and the voluntary ones, if you remember in the thing. So like, look at, you know, there is a role there for reminding farmers of their obligations with regards to regulations, and you know that goes without saying. But then there has been farmers that have gone above and beyond. So, you know, fencing off and putting in solar power drinkers and things like that. I know they were looking for funding for it, and I'm not sure that every farmer that was to fence off has gotten financial compensation. I think some might have. I'm actually not 100% sure on that, but I know there was an application gone in for funding, but I think most of the work was voluntary. Some of the solar power drinkers that are quite expensive kits, so I think there was an application gone in for funding there, and I think some of them might have gotten funding in that. So I apologize, I can't give a definite answer on that, but
and then there's on in engagement as well. There's a question for Joe there. How many farmers or percentage are participating in the different dairy initiatives, and is it a big enough incentive to implement the measures?
Well, I think we're on the beginning of a journey, and we will see the sustainability payment system strengthen over the course of the next 2 years, because in relation to kind of trying to support the Teagasc macro and trying to support best practice across all the different challenges. So I think we are going to see that moving from the kind of the initial steps that have just been taken onto a stronger and a more fulsome approach. And also we're going to need kind of verification that stuff has been done in order to demonstrate to regulators that when we say we do stuff, that it does happen, and then that the science will be able to track it and pick it up once those changes are made. So I think that in relation to the stuff that the Department of Agriculture is doing in relation to the CAP restructuring, and in relation to the acres, and in relation to the signpost farms, and in relation to what the co-ops are doing, that it requires all those different things to step up a level or two. And that's what we're going to see over the course of the next 2 years in particular, as we move in the next few months to implementation, which will start light, it will get to medium, and then it will ramp up fully, because all change management programs take that sort of approach. And that's the journey we're currently on. The next decade will be all about sustainability, and Ireland will inevitably and without question will get to that outcome by 2030, where the 25% will have been delivered and where water quality will have been fixed. That's where we've got to get to.
Question, a follow-on question. Does the team agree with the comments from the Department of Housing on Wednesday that dairy processors benefit from farmers' environmental sustainability, particularly when marketing products abroad, and therefore should be providing greater economic returns and farm-level advice on sustainability and nitrates reduction to farmers?
Well, I think it is fair to say that that while we have gotten into markets on the back of our green image and so on and so forth, international markets do not give extra money for sustainability performance. And that is kind of continuing to be the position in relation to all of the markets that the dairy sector is in. There is not a sustainability premium paid for any product on the back of sustainability performance.
Okay, there's a question there in relation to solar panels. Do the solar powered pumps take drinking water from the protected river?
Yeah, sure. Like they need a source for water, so they would be piped. Typically, what you have is you have it sited, the unit itself sited in close proximity to the river, and you'd have the trough maybe sited that little bit farther away, or you know they're quite powerful. They can pump water for quite a distance, so they're quite a very useful tool on a farm, but they are expensive, and they have a bit of piping and a bit of work to be done with them to install them. But typically they would be taking it out of the river that they're beside. Yeah.
One of our viewers here is questioning the sustainability measures being brought out by the co-ops. Says when you are getting rewarded for buying fertilizer and not rewarded for not buying or buying less fertilizer, one would have to question the credibility of the initiatives. Have to buy it only from your own milk processor further weakens the bona fides of these payments. Biodiversity loss is not being addressed by the payments, which means as farmers, we will continue to struggle to send out a positive message. And I know, Donald or Joe, you were saying that, look, this is start of a journey, but are we moving quickly enough on that journey, I suppose, and are we on the right path based on the question here?
Well, I think that one of the major improvements that can happen to water quality is that if there is a switch from a particular type of fertilizer, which is CAN, to protected urea, and if and the payment scheme that you would have seen have been supporting a move to the use of protected urea, which is going to have very beneficial impacts on both water and on climate change. So that's actually a very impactful and a right initiative in my view. So all these kind of right initiatives are going to be strengthened and accelerated over time. And we are at the beginning of the journey. So
just a slightly bigger question. I'm sure you've considered this one, Joe. I mean, how do we communicate that the sustainability of the products back to the consumer? And you're quite right in saying that connection doesn't seem to be there in terms of the price or we know that, look, there is a cohort of consumers that are prepared to pay a premium for organic produce, but you know, when we're looking at the other products that are on the shelves, how can we create that linkage there for consumers to have confidence that the products that they're buying are being produced in a sustainable way and that the farmers are being rewarded for that?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that the system of production in Ireland, which is based on a grass-based system of cows going out to grass so many days a year in a very kind of ordinary and natural, which we think is kind of, in Ireland, we think that that's the only way that dairy is done. Whereas in other countries, cows are kept like chickens in a shed, and their food is brought into them and their slurry is taken away, and it's kind of like battery cows in effect in a lot of parts of the world. Our system is not like that. It is very natural, actually, in fact, and that's what kind of Board BIA have been communicating across the world, that because of the temperate climate that we have, which grows grass, and where cows can be out and feeding in a very natural way, and then turning what is an inedible product, which is grass, into food, which is just incredible. I mean, I keep being blown away by the efficacy of the cow to be able to do all this stuff. Whereas if you were to do that by mechanical means, if you were to take grass, for example, and try to turn it into some food, the amount of energy and carbon stuff that you'd have to do and life cycle analysis would just be strange and just wouldn't stack up. But this is the particular gift that both Ireland and New Zealand have. And so I think Board B have done a great job of communicating that, but consumers are not going to pay extra for it. That's been the position so far.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Two other questions. Noel, I suppose quite a specific question in relation to engagement with farmers who have rented land as opposed to owned land, and I suppose the increasing feature of Irish agriculture. So have you noticed differences between it, and how have you tackled it?
Yeah, so I suppose it's a very good question. I suppose there's the kind of the Conacre system or the 11-month system where farmers are renting it and they don't know whether they're going to have it next year, and then you have the more long-term leases. So I suppose the more long-term leases, it's more straightforward because the farmer knows that if there are measures going in, that they're going to be there for a while, so they can plan ahead. I suppose where we did meet a lot of problems was where a farmer would be renting a bit of ground, for example. We go back to the solar power drinkers or the fencing off of water courses in particular, and we have data to back this up, that where ground is rented, farmers are much on the 11-month system or the Conacre system, they won't put in any features for us because they don't know, there's no security, they don't know whether they're going to be there or not the following year. And I suppose typically what you have is maybe elderly landowners or maybe landowners that could be in Dublin or Galway or whatever, and detach that a little bit and not showing that much interest in it. So they are reluctant in that situation to put in features. So it is something that we are aware of, and part of the reason why we've managed to get some funding from the government with regards to the water quality EIP, so that can go in not at the expense of the guy that's on the short-term rent, can go in and be there for the benefit of the next person or the person after, as the case may be.
I think a key question, and I suppose a simple, straightforward question, but I might broaden it. Do all Teagasc advisors know about ASSAP, and do they buy into its objectives? And I suppose broadening that out to the role of ASSAP beyond the PAAs, working with other advisors, and the same with the co-op advisors in relation to influencing others within the co-ops in relation to their objectives. So I suppose a question for both of you.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a very good question. We've a large body of work to do to get this more mainstream. Everybody that's involved in agriculture, you'd want to be head under a rock not to know that water quality is a big issue with regards to farming. So everybody should be aware of those problems. Are they aware of kind of the principles around catchment science and management? Are they aware of all the tools that are there? Are they aware of the mitigation actions, and would they be able to recommend them? I would say no, but they should be aware that they can contact their ASSAP advisor. We're in each of the regions throughout Teagasc. Advisors through in each region. That's your first stop if you do have an issue. But certainly they should have an awareness of water quality problems. But there is a challenge there for and it was part of one of the recommendations actually from the expert group. How do we mainstream this more? How do we upskill the broader advisory service? How do we get it embedded in the farm visit? So if you're going out visiting a farm and you want to talk about grassland management and breeding, environment issues should be one of the 2 or 3 things you talk to a farmer every time you go out, be it biodiversity or greenhouse gases or water quality. They should be part of that call that you were making, not just grassland management, not just breeding, not just whatever else you're talking about. It should be embedded that way. So I think that's where we need to get to.
Joe?
I think this is the big task for us really, is to mainstream the system of production, of agri-production that we have for tillage and dairy and beef, and to get it to move from being efficient and effective and productive into sustainable production to scientific standard across those particular pillars that I mentioned earlier. So that is kind of the big challenge for us all now as a society and as an agri-society, is to move to sustainable production and for it to be mainstreamed and embedded and normal, not something that you pay extra for.
Okay, we're just out of time, I'm afraid. Look, I want to say thank you, Joe and Noel, for excellent presentations and keeping this really important topic right up on the agenda. And look, we will keep getting regular updates from you as time goes on. So just Noel, the cycle of the ASSAP program, where are we at now?
So we were tied with the river basin management plan cycles. So cycle 2 ended at the start of 2020, or at the end of 2021. So the next cycle ends at the end of 2027. So ASSAP has been extended. So again, I want to thank our funding departments for providing the funding for us to extend us to the end of 2027. So that's where we're at with it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Noel, and Pat, thanks very much for helping with questions. Just to remind everybody that there is going to be a major organic beef open day taking place on Wednesday, the 28th of September in Cashel, County Tipperary. So our organic colleagues have asked us to just remind viewers of that event. Full details are available on the Teagasc website. And next week, we're going to be joined by Professor Thea Hennessy and Tracy Bradfield, who are going to be talking about farmers' attitudes to results-based contracts, and that takes place next Friday. Special thanks to Yvonne Maher for helping out in the background today, and also to Andy Boland on the production of the series. And so until next week, we will talk to you then. Thanks again, everybody. You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.